Rebekah Haynie here, breaking down what we learned from our front row seat, or like fifth row, at the, we're VIPs, but we're not VVIPs, at the Family Leadership Summit. Who was absolutely great staff. Major kudos to them pulling off this amazing event. Thousands of people in attendance. The kickoff, and with all eyes really internationally looking at this stage of presidential contenders and casting this vision for a reformed America, for a revival in America, for a rediscovery of Christian worldview, I would say, but a rediscovery of the values that did and has and can make America great. Protection of the family, protection of life, understanding the Constitution again. Hello. I mean, individual liberty, individual responsibility, the freedom to pursue your dream, the freedom to pursue your happiness without tyranny, oppression from the government. I mean, all of these things made America great and can yet again continue to make America great. And those are the types of things that are supposed to take center stage at a summit like this. And I think the final two, we've been going down this whole slate and giving you our honest takes, fresh up, serving up hot. And we've been through several. Donald Trump was not there, so his turn on the hot seat will have to wait for another day. But the final two candidates in the lineup of the chronologically, I think were the ones that the most people that I heard from were impressed by. And I don't know what your rankings are. We didn't compare this before we started the show. But we'll get honest takes. Yes.
Vivek was silver. You know,
he's up next. All right. So I'll let you tell me what you liked about Vivek Ramaswamy. I think I say his name slightly differently every time, but I should know by now. He was probably the most generous with his time as far as media goes, I'll say, because that's one of the hats I was wearing as I was running around interviewing everybody. And he was the most generous with reporters about answering their questions.
Well, first of all, I think I'm gonna make it quick because, for sake of time, and I want to get to the gold candidate here. One of the things that I believe Vivek does right is he knows the pulse of Iowans. I don't know if he's saying the same things in other states. I know what he's saying here, and he knows the pulse of Iowans. He got probably more applause than almost any other candidate because he was saying things that other candidates weren't. Even though they were being asked these questions, they would go around the question and kind of answer it circumspectly, but Vivek would actually answer, and it was a solid answer. He when asked about the January 6th thing, and was it an insurrection, or why do you think people were angry? I can't remember how the question was asked. I think it was, why do you think people were angry? And Vivek was very clear. They were angry because they feel they're being censored. They feel their vote doesn't matter, and he was very clear on that. And he just got, you could hear the applause out on the streets. The people obviously. They feel that. They believe that. Everyone I talk to out there in the coffee shops, in the restaurants, on the streets, I hear it all the time. People are concerned that their vote doesn't count. I don't know how many people, especially the older generation, feel that the votes were rigged. The election was rigged, and they talk about it all the time. And this is one of the first times in history where you see both young, middle-aged, and old people on the Republican side of things anyway, they're all wearing tinfoil hats. They all agree.
It's so stylish. I love silver.
And now it's like we're all on the same page.
How much we have learned.
We want to know our votes matter. And
yes.
Vivek was very clear on that. And then he made it very clear, too, and not just by telling his own story. He made it very clear from a very sincere place that he believed that the problem with America was a God-shaped hole in their life. And I thought that was a big thing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that he did that I think got a huge applause was that young people his age and others, that America does not belong fighting for another country halfway around the world.
Okay, so this is where he stands in stark contrast to, say, the Mike Pences of the world.
Correct.
Or the people who aren't quite sure. Because I don't know, I can't remember exactly what Tim Scott did address this, and he was trying to say, here's how I would handle it, although his specifics were a little vague. I think Vivek was very open about the fact he did not want to get involved in another war. He's going to be firmly on a more, what you might say is isolationist and or America first. He's saying we need to fix our own countries here at home. But he does have a lot of specifics on foreign policy where he would say he went to the press gaggle and he said, which is a fun word to say, gaggle, and he laid out foreign policy in very specific terms, and I think his plan might work. Where he's saying, here's the deal that you have to make with Russia. You have to give them something out of the deal in order to allow Putin to save face just a little bit. You can't come in and say you're the villain and give us everything, because that's not going to work unless you really want to go to war. But he outlined what he believed a peace agreement between all of the players involved would look like, and what America could do short of war to actually bring peace instead of exacerbating, instead of escalating things.
And it all has to do with a strong America and using the tools we have here in America to enforce things overseas. And one of the things that I liked about Vivek is that he answered the questions. He didn't answer a question and then try to talk about something else on his agenda. He answered the questions, period. Yeah. And he said too, when they talked about the health of America, he said the health in America is tied to the amount of people who feel they're being censored. And then he said something that I thought was very, 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 very interesting with regards to the Ukraine. And it said that the litmus test is if, and I quote, if Vladimir Putin were doing it and we would call it a threat to democracy, then it's a threat to democracy when we do it on this side of the Atlantic as well.
Very true.
So,
amen.
Yes. Yep. And I thought that was very well done. Again, Vivek and Ron, in my opinion, were neck and neck the whole time.
Yeah. Okay, so I got a chance to catch up with Vivek, and here's what he said. You seem to have a really natural energy when it comes to, you bring the energy.
Thank you.
And there's a lot of people that I think are on track with a positive message. And so I wondered if you would recap what you think is connecting with Iowans in that positive vision for America. You mentioned that, and I think that that's part of your story. It seems like it comes from a natural place for you.
It definitely comes from a natural place in that I am a natural optimist. I am optimistic about this country. But I think the thing about me is that I'm deeply concerned about our country. It's not that I deny the threats that are facing us in plain sight. And so I think that combination, I think, is what's helping this message land a little bit with the audiences is we don't want, I don't think Iowans or Americans across the country are hungry for a fake optimism.
Right.
Sort of a, kumbaya, let's all get along, hold hands, and it's morning in America again, because it's not. No. But it can be. And I think we need somebody who on one hand understands the dire circumstance we face, but on the other hand still believes that we can be a nation in ascent. That's my conviction, but it turns out I think that's something that's resonating with people.
You've done really well when it comes to fighting against maybe some combative interviews in the past, and so I appreciate the positivity of the message. But even just in our press junket there were people that see America very differently and in a very negative way, that are not proud to be American. So I wonder, what is your message to them? How do we have these discussions where we can come together as one nation when there are other people that think, one side says America is great and the other side says it's not, and we need to fundamentally dismantle the institutions of our government? There's a lot of distrust and division there.
I think that most of the underlying people outside of the media or institutional establishment, they don't actually have those beliefs. They're just lost. Okay. I truly believe that. Now, when you're spiritually void, that's a vacuum. That's a dangerous place where poison will fill that void. But I think the sooner we realize what we're actually working with is a void rather than a conviction, then it actually opens up the path to how we actually address it. Right? Because there's one thing, if you think you're actually addressing someone who has conviction, that's one strategy, and I think it's a strategy we're adopting, but we're adopting that strategy against people who are actually just facing a void. Spiritual void, a moral void, a national void. Fill that void, recognize that. And that's why the optimism can't be just, you have to understand what's actually going on before you actually fill that void.
How do you do that? How do you fill the void?
I think we're articulating an affirmative vision of who we really are.
Okay.
Right? Talk more about what we stand for. Individual, family, nation, God. That's the prescription. American identity. Study 1776. It's a 1776 moment today. Revive the convictions that there are certain undeniable truths in this country, that there is a God, that we are a self-governing free people, that the people we elect to run the government should run the government, that we are sovereign as a nation. I think these are truths that people are hungry for, and I'm just a vehicle for delivering it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
He impressed me in a huge way, something that I haven't mentioned, and I don't know if other outlets will, but you heard it here first, folks. He is the first presidential candidate I've ever seen to be able to outline both pro-life policy and foreign policy while their 4-year-old was dangling from their arm.
Yes.
Like, literally, he's in the sweetest little boy. I can't remember his name. The sweetest little boy. And he, got away from his babysitter or something. And so he was standing right by dad at the podium. And he was literally hanging, doing chin-ups off of his dad's arm. It was so relatable. That was the most relatable I've seen a politician be in probably my lifetime. So way to go for their family life.
America would do it wrong by voting for him as president of the United States.
Well, it's a young family, so it's a completely different look than what we've seen over the last several elections, which is a lot of older and they always say it's the old white guys, right? And I'm not getting into the racial aspect. That shouldn't even be a question to me. But to have the young, I don't think it's a problem that he's got youth and energy and optimism on his side. I think a lot of people are attracted by that. And over again, he was like the surprise breakout star that I heard. His name was on everybody's lips, and he was the one that got the organic standing ovations. A lot of leaders, people stood up to clap when they ended.
Yeah,
when they left.
It's like, yay!
At the end. Well, yes, I mean, take your pick. But organically, he got standing ovations in the middle of his speeches.
For a majority of these speeches, it was Tucker getting the applause as opposed to the candidate.
He was doing the work.
Yes.
I will say. He did what he was there to do, and I thought he did it well.
You're making a point here, I think needs to be stated for the record and with clarity, and that is there's a lot of people out there trying to say, well, I'm not going to vote for Vivek because he's an Indian. What God does he worship? Which God? What's the name of his God? And and
it wouldn't be in his Indian heritage. It would be whether or not he's a Hindu, right? Or what his personal beliefs are, his religious beliefs.
As long as he defends life, as long as he defends families, as long as he defends marriage, as long as he defends religious freedom, as long as he fights against censorship, because the same people who are trying to say, well, I'm not going to vote for him because he's not a true Christian, are the same people that are saying they're going to vote for Trump even though he is not going to defend life.
Ooh, see, you said so much there, and I want to jump on like every sentence that you just said, but we're going to run out of time if I do. Yeah. And also, it may not be good for a marriage.
So let's talk about DeSantis.
Real life diplomacy. I will say I'm not there yet to say that I can vote for someone that I know actively practices another religion. Like, I need to know what you mean by faith. And as we were walking and talking, I did get a couple of minutes with Vivek, and I was able to ask him a couple of questions. He talked about the void in people's lives. Like you said, that God-shaped hole. Those weren't exactly the words that he used for me, but he said people are lost and they have a void in their life. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And how do you fill it?
Correct.
How do you fill that void? And those are the types of questions we need to be asking. What do you mean by faith? What do you mean by God? Because again, I think the same standard applies. If we're saying, all right, you're pro-life, what does that look like? Then it's the same thing for people's faith and worldview questions. You say you have faith. You say you believe in God. You say you pray. Well, what does that look like to you? And then every voter can judge according to their conscience. Again, we've heard over and over again, Jesus Christ isn't running on the ballot. Okay, but I need to be able to trust your value systems. I need to know what standard you're going to uphold yourself to and what you mean when you say these words. And then I can judge whether or not I can hire you to this most important representative job in the entire world. I need to know if I can trust you to be my voice and with my vote. So that's where I am on that. I'm not saying no, I'm just saying he was the most impressive, I think the breakout star of that day, because people didn't know what to think of him. I think he was that surprise candidate that everybody liked. I heard everything positive about Vivek, and you give him a silver medal.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I loved him at the Faith and Freedom Coalition. I mean, when you come out and you start off, one of the first things you say is we need to defund the Department of Education. Right there, you've got me. Let's go.
Well, I have heard some people bring up concerns about, number one, he's never been elected before, but I don't.
Awesome. That's another point in his favor.
I think that's a gold star for a lot of people, actually. And
he's the only one. He's not been elected to anything, but yet he has all the answers. He's like, here's my step-by-step process of what we're going to do day one.
He's one of the smartest people.
Pence can't even do that.
He's one of the smartest people I've met in the political realm thus far.
Yeah.
which is, again, points in my book. I will say people have concerns about his background with pharmaceutical companies and after some suspicion. So all of that should be duly researched. And I will continue to do my research to watch with an impressed eye thus far. And I think most people at the summit I heard 3 names spoken of glowingly. Tim Scott was number 3. Vivek was number 2.
Yep.
I think the biggest takeaways are yet to come, and we'll reveal our rankings for who we think did the best, did the good, the bad, and the ugly when we return. You're listening to Faith Works Live.